Rolling death is the best way to describe the HK tank. It's Skynet's heavy ground support that dominates the battlefield. To fight such a behemoth is a task only the bravest will undertake, and untold thousands have been slain by these mechanical abominations. The origins of the HK tank date all the way back before Judgment Day, when Skynet attempted to wipe humanity out in a single strike. The model it is based off is the T-1 ground assault vehicle. This was a prototype created by Cyberdyne Systems, as they had not yet perfected bipedal walking designs, so a tracked heavy weapons platform was a great alternative to show off to potential investors and buyers. Little did they know this machine would one day be scaled up to gigantic proportions, which would unleash death upon humanity's surviving souls. The production of these machines was a massive undertaking by Skynet, and no exact date was given for the HK tank's introduction, but it would have been fairly early in the future war, as it was based off the pre-existing T-1. And after the realisation that large amounts of humanity had survived and began to coordinate, Skynet needed something that could smash large groups of humans in a short period of time. The factories to produce these were massive, as there were many parts needed to build the tank, and in its fully constructed form it required huge mechanical construction machines that could handle the huge weight and size of its components. And the location of these factories was in safe and secure regions of Skynet's territory with heavy defences, as a single factory could produce multiple tanks per day and would be a major target of the human resistance. And each individual tank required large amounts of advanced materials and technology, meaning even a single HK tank was an investment that Skynet needed to pay off. Though once built and deployed, they required little maintenance and resupply thanks to the heavy plasma fusion reactor running the entire tank, including its weapons ammunition. So logistically, it was a fantastic tool for Skynet, as logistics was always a weak point against the Resistance and their guerrilla warfare strategies. And due to this expense in making the tanks, Skynet tended to prioritise using them for heavy assaults and causing as much damage as possible. So it was rare to see a HK tank on defensive duties, as static turrets could do a similar job for far less of a price. The size of the HK tank is the first thing anyone who encounters it notices. It's striking how massive it is, towering at around 25 feet in height, 30 foot from front to back, and from gun to gun it's as wide as it is tall, easily 25 foot across. This gives it a very imposing profile that instantly installs terror, and once a human sees the destruction it can unleash, that fear would increase tenfold. Though the width is more of a concern than the height, as it would struggle to move through narrow areas. This large size is because of the odd design. Instead of a standard human tank, which are far smaller and normally designed around a single strong cannon as its main armaments, and attempts to be as compact as possible to minimise its target potential, the HK tank is akin to a large rolling sentry tower, with a very tall profile with the head of the tank being very exposed, but this gives it good visibility and lines of sight, with it being able to rotate 360 degrees. This head is mounted on the vehicle's arms that mounts its weapons. They are spread wide to both sides, giving the turrets the ability to shoot at targets easily, and they also run parallel with its track so the turrets can aim downwards at any enemies that get too close to the tank. Only the bravest souls would ever achieve this though. It's interesting that the torso is able to rotate 360 degrees, as are the turret mounts and the head, meaning the HK tank can respond to any threat very effectively. Then we lead to the central torso which connects these areas, and this is mounted on the base which houses the massive tracks in the rear of the vehicle, where main components such as the power source are housed. This design is definitely not intended to be compact, and it seems to me it's to maximise the ability of the sensors and weapons to be able to hit targets in every direction, especially as it is so high up. This would help as it traverses the ruins of the old world, and it could shoot over cover that humans might be cowering behind. And as it's based off the T-1 design, Skynet must have its own strange logic deem that this design is superior to the human style of tanks. As always though, rule of cool applies. The weight to accompany this massive size is around 50 to 60 tons, though no official figures exist. And even with its large size, Skynet was able to use its advanced hyper-alloys and lightweight materials to keep the overall weight down. This is as important as if using more conventional materials, we would have seen something akin to 130 tons plus, which would have made movement over most terrain untenable. Now this leads me to how the HK tank moved around the battlefield. Now it may look like it has a pair of tracks, but it's actually 4, as they are split between 2 sets either side, with each set of tracks being triangular, and when paired together they give a trapezoid shaped design, and each individual track has separate controls so the HK tank's brain can maximise each one depending on the situation. These are then connected via a large V-shaped housing which sits atop them and connects to the main base of the HK chassis, and the main body is several feet above where the tracks meet the floor, so the HK tank has decent ground clearance. This track layout is very different to the more standard design used in human main battle tanks, and this odd design was supposed to give the HK tank superior grip on rough and slippery terrain, as with the state of the world after Judgment Day, well-maintained roads were few and far between, and with its immense weight having to cross rough terrain required heavy-duty tracks. The ability to clear obstacles seems rather hindered by this type of design, as it seems the track's road wheels have very little flexibility in their movement, and the HK tank just ploughs through most obstructions, and the width of the actual tracks is massive, at least 4 foot across, giving great weight displacement, reducing the chance of it sinking into the ground. I will note that if the HK tank's tracks are damaged by either weapons fire or a mechanical fault, with the 4-track design, if just one is damaged, it's most likely it would be able to continue moving, but a bit more carefully than usual, and this would help with withdrawing for repairs and maintenance. But if a whole set was destroyed with its size and weight, it would be a nightmare to repair on the battlefield. A bit of an unknown feature on the HK tank is that on the front of its torso area, it has a pair of heavy-duty arms that are a little hard to notice unless you know where they are, and these are folded up whilst in combat. These may seem like a little pair of useless arms like a T-Rex, but they're actually very strong, and capable of using machinery and moving higher up obstructions out of the way. There's even reports that resistance soldiers hiding in the upper floors of ruined buildings have been plucked away and crushed by these nasty mitts. The movement speed of the HK tank seems to be rather slow, with it hitting a maximum speed of 20 miles per hour, and it tends to move at a combat speed of around 10 miles per hour. This is extremely slow for a tank, but as its main purpose was to sweep and clear leftover human forces that remained after Judgment Day, Skynet probably deemed it perfect for this job. And as it's designed on the T1 and produced before an organised resistance became an issue for Skynet, speed probably wasn't a major factor, with armament and armour taking priority. Still, Skynet should have made it far quicker for tactical flexibility and logistics. And to be able to move this monster would require not only tracks but something to power them. So the HK tank is equipped with a very powerful plasma fusion reactor located in the base between the tracks. This location provides it great protection and allows for easy allocation of power to all the systems that require it. It's a smart choice for a power source, as with the weapons also being plasma based, it means it has near unlimited firepower, and the plasma reactor could potentially go for years of active use with very little maintenance, as they were very reliable and a technology that Skynet had mastered in detail. The downside of plasma reactors is their highly volatile nature, and if they suffer major damage, they explode in extremely violent fashion, destroying the tank beyond any chance of repair, and any supporting units such as infantry or even other HK vehicles would sustain heavy damage if they're in close proximity. The durability of the HK tank was leaps and bounds above even some of Skynet's toughest T-series models. With its immense size and ability to have very thick hyper-alloy armour, it was all but impervious to everything except heavy plasma weapons and heavy anti-tank weapons such as advanced ATGMs with specialist warheads, and with the armour ranging from 10 cm up to 70 cm of hyper-alloy, it was a fortress on tracks, and its comparable armour thickness outclasses any of the main battle tanks of the time period. The strongest areas being the base and torso were nearly impervious, and the resistance learned very quickly to completely ignore these in battle with the HK tanks. But some vulnerabilities did present themselves. First, the main sensors on the head and spotlights were vulnerable to sustained fire, preferably from plasma weaponry, and these could be knocked out, reducing the HK tank's combat effectiveness. The next major weak spot was the tracks, with well-placed very powerful explosive charges that could destroy the tracks, wheels or sprockets to immobilise the HK tank. And if the explosion was able to detonate on the underside of the base, where the armour was thinner, it could cause catastrophic damage to the reactor, and a massive explosion would ensue. There are also panels located around the HK tank, with a major one being at its rear, most likely for maintenance of the reactor and internal components. And even though still well armoured, if it was breached, it would give easy shots into vital systems that would shut down the entire tank. Now, most people will simply say just use an ATGM missile. Well, most people may have overlooked the advanced targeting systems of the HK tank and its rapid-fire heavy plasma cannons that can act as a point defence system and could engage and shoot down incoming projectiles. So unless fired at closer ranges before they can be detected, the ATGMs could be stopped pretty easily. But if an abundance of targets were engaging the HK tank, you could overwhelm it and still get rockets and missiles through to hit it. though they would have to be very strong to penetrate the strong hyper-alloy armour. Another obvious way to take out a HK tank was the use of a main battle tank, but unfortunately for humanity, these were not only in short supply and needed significant logistics to keep going. Skynet had almost 100% air superiority, and large vehicles like this were a major target and would normally be destroyed before they got within range of any Skynet ground forces. This is why the Resistance relied on guerrilla warfare and small unit tactics to mitigate losses due to Skynet's air patrols. And throughout the future war, the most efficient way to deal with the HK tank the Resistance found was the use of very powerful satchel charges or mines that were pre-laid into the tank's path and would detonate once it was on top of them. And this worked very well in very dense terrain such as the ruins of humanity's cities, where powerful canister charges could also be tossed into the HK tank's path, though it was likely that the human throwing the bomb would be blown to bits, so it required nearly suicidal bravery to do so. And even if the HK tank suffered heavy damage, as long as the plasma reactor and the structure around it were intact, it could be refitted and repaired, as the reactor was by far the most resource-heavy component in the tank. Now, to go with this heavy armour and durability, it needed an armament to match. Well, Skynet didn't skimp on that. Now, the main weapons of the HK tank are a pair of rapid-fire heavy plasma cannons. These came in either a single-barreled or double-barreled variant. They're insanely powerful, with a single shot capable of blowing a human being apart, and light vehicles would be destroyed with 1 or 2 shots. Even heavy armoured vehicles would turn into scrap under the relentless plasma barrage, and their armour would melt into molten slag. And each individual gun had a fire rate of around 600 shots per minute. The weapons being powered from the plasma reactor have pretty much unlimited ammunition, and the only real limitation would be heat build-up. But the heavy plasma cannons are housed in large turret mounts on the end of the HK tank's arms, and it's reasonable to conclude that large amounts of heat sinks and heat dispersion equipment is built in to keep the guns pumping, and inbuilt safeguards would limit explosive damage if the turrets were hit by heavy weapons. The heavy plasma cannons also have very quick rotation speed, being able to move in a 360-degree field of fire and engage any target unless the HK tank's own structure blocks the shot. But with both heavy plasma cannons combined, no target was safe. And a full rotation of the gun only takes 2 seconds, meaning with the advanced AI targeting systems, the HK tank can unleash insanely accurate and deadly firepower and annihilate dozens of targets in mere seconds. And to expand on its targeting systems, both gun turrets could engage independent targets with near-perfect accuracy, as they had individual targeting modules, so they weren't reliant on the main head sensors. The systems could also predict projectile trajectories, analyse multiple targets and prioritise the most deadly threat. It could also react so fast that the plasma cannons could do point defence, as we said earlier. And no matter the speed of the tank or if sudden jolts would occur due to rough terrain, the targeting systems could keep the guns perfectly stable, and the accuracy would not suffer as long as the targeting systems were intact. Now, I mentioned that in the Terminator Resistance game, the HK tanks armed with a quad-barrel launcher that fired either rockets or missiles. Even though not official canon, I think the weapon system really does suit the HK tank, as it turns it into more of a siege platform, able to bombard resistance positions and destroy obstructions so that lighter Skynet forces can begin their assaults. This combined with Skynet's interlinked machines would also allow for pinpoint artillery strikes from this heavily armoured and armed platform. And rockets or missile also leave the ability for specialised warheads which could increase the lethality and flexibility of the HK tank by a huge margin. To tie this durability, mobility and heavy firepower together was the HK tank's brain. Now, unlike models of the T-series, there was no need for infiltration protocols or advanced learning. The HK tank had one job: destruction of the enemy with overwhelming firepower. And its intelligence focused on pathfinding so the HK tank wouldn't crash or become immobilised on rough terrain, scanning of the surrounding area so it could locate targets and potential threats to not only itself but other Skynet machines deployed alongside it. I also think the HK tank with its massive size was also like a mobile command centre, with communication and cooperation between Skynet's various forces centred around these rolling sentry towers. And the connection to Skynet would have been nearly impossible to disrupt, making them ideal as a centre of a combined arms push, and also why the Resistance made them a priority target. Now, the HK tank was not as smart as something like a T-800, which did mean it could be lured into ambushes and kill zones, but it was rare that these machines were deployed without infantry or air support. A HK area was always close by, so that if the Resistance set up some kind of anti-tank, normally it was blasted long before it could take a shot. And the infantry units that accompanied the HK tank were normally T500, 600s or 800 infantry models, which would be spread around the tank, This meant that if you were a resistance fighter tasked with destroying such a beast, you had to get past many lethal T-series units, and if a firefight started, you could be damn sure the HK tank was going to join in and ruin your day. There was also a major security issue with this brain, and Skynet never anticipated any of the resistance being able to access one where the HK tank was still in a usable state, and on several occasions resistance forces reprogrammed HK tanks for their own use. This was a huge mistake by Skynet, and some kind of internal safeguard or booby trap that would cause self-destruction of the tank should have been implemented. An odd thing that I saw years ago but haven't been able to confirm or find was that some HK tanks had infantry bays able to hold 4 T-series models that could be deployed from the rear, just like an armoured personnel carrier. Even if this is just my own imagination going wild, I could imagine Skynet having handles placed on the sides of the HK tank and T-series models grabbing on and riding into battle, a bit like Soviet tank riders, as the machine's strength meant they didn't need to worry about falling off. And when the HK tank is at max speed, it was a great way to transport the slower and older T-series models. Before we wrap up the video on the HK tank, there is a variant of note called the Ogre. This tank was larger than the standard design and encountered during the Battle of the Kansas Bunker, where it was being used to smash resistance fighters in fortified positions. No details on the changes it had, but one can imagine even heavier weapons. Maybe a siege variant of the plasma cannons with a lower rate of fire but more powerful shots, and increased armour as it was going against massive fortified positions. And I think we can see with the HK tank in this video, even though it was an odd design, it was extremely lethal, and due to the fact that humanity was having to fight a guerrilla war against Skynet, it had complete dominance over the battlefield until the later stages of the war. And I, for one, would not want to have to fight a HK tank, not unless I was packing a small tactical nuke. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, I hope it provided you with some good information. Obviously, always happy to take constructive criticism. If I missed anything, drop it in the comments. And yeah, I just hope it was a good view and something nice to listen to. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and as always, have a beautiful evening.